Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder. And our program today is on the future of mind science. Now, of course, we're not exactly predicting what's going to happen, but we're taking a look at trends of evolution of mind. How is the human intelligence developing? Both intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, understanding ourselves, awakening to the fact that we have a higher consciousness that can take a big picture perspective. As the human mind evolves, as the science of understanding the human mind evolves, we're taking a look at where we might go. What's possible for the human being?
Mind science itself is still a fairly new term, certainly less than a century old. I'm not sure exactly what to trace it to. In many ways, it comes out of spiritual traditions, not religious so much, but attempts over time to blend the Eastern, Middle Eastern, and Western philosophies together. I think mind science in some ways comes out of the New Thought movement of the early 19th century in New England, or Theosophy, Blavatsky and Bailey and those people that were really trying to mix Christian and Jewish mysticism with Sufism and Buddhism and Hinduism, and they found a lot of continuity, which is interesting, that speaks to the idea that evolution is more maybe than what Darwin was simply suggesting. Not only do we, as a physical species, respond to natural selection, but mentally and, of course, emotionally as well. That's part of mind science. We're evolving and we're growing, not only having access to more information, standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, for example, but the idea that we're actually growing bigger brains, gray matter. We now know we can promote the proliferation of neurons, the proliferation of little capillaries that feed blood and oxygen and nutrition to that gray matter, and even gray matter itself. We can grow the brain with certain relaxation techniques.
It is pretty remarkable. We've always known that by changing the brain, you change your mind. But now we know by changing your mind, you can actually change the physical structure of your brain. This is an incredible field of neuroplasticity. But, to me, the best evidence of the evolution of the human mind is how recently it was that we made what I think is the most major shift in our thinking process as long as we've been around. That as little as a few hundred years ago, we shifted from believing what we were told to questioning authority and proving things through a scientific method. The Enlightenment period, after the Dark Ages, we just got a glimpse of that, but it's really only the last couple hundred years that we have done this thing where we investigate scientifically and we don't accept weird hypotheses just because somebody in the government or the church or whatever said so. To me, this is a relatively new phenomenon, and as it evolves, we have invented more things, we've understood more things in the last couple of hundred years than in the couple million that preceded it. I mean, as little as a couple of hundred years ago, we didn't know what a star was made of. We didn't understand the nature of radioactivity. And from that moment on, we've got all the developments that have come so rapidly since then. I mean, electricity is really new, So what we're taking a look at now is, as we are questioning, as we are deeply delving into understanding the nature of our relationship to nature, we're going to come up with some amazing inventions. We're doing it all the time. Inventions that will add to humans' ability to solve human problems. Because I think if there is a growth process that we're going through, an evolution process, is how can we help each other better? How can we come on, people, now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. How do we do that? That, to me, is the evolution process. And what it takes, more than evolving of intellectual intelligence, more than IQ, it takes a developing of EQ. So we don't get mad at each other instantly, so we don't automatically decide that that's us and this is them, so that we can learn to trust and understand and reach out a hand and love the unity that comes in accepting the diversity.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think materialism is always going to play a role in the material existence, but we're going to find a better, more appropriate balance. I think the Industrial Revolution, and we're talking about science and that other word, technology, science and technology, the Industrial Revolution, and then, right on the heels of that, the computer revolution, the information age, and that's like a 1-2 punch that has really fascinated us and bedazzled us with what science, technology, industry can manufacture for us. Goodies that we can run out and buy, that we were really certain for a long time were going to improve the quality of our lives. And indeed, in many ways, they did. For example, to jump in the car and drive to work sure beats hooking the horse up to the buckboard and all that that would involve, or walking to work or whatever. But what did we do? We moved farther and farther away from work. You could say, well, an expression of freedom. Yep, but then there was a price to pay. That started when gas was 25 cents a gallon. Now it's $3.50, pushing $4 in some parts of the country a gallon. People are thinking maybe I could live a little closer to work. So now we're talking about telecommuting and the role of the computer in cutting down those long trips. It's a fascinating interplay as we orient ourselves, I think. It's like, yeah, we've got this great science and technology. We can build all this cool stuff, but at what price and what for? Why? I think many of us recognize fairly early in life, once you get some stuff, that this is not as fulfilling as you thought it would be. Again, it's nice to have. I like having a car that starts when I turn the key and some shelter that doesn't leak rain on me in the middle of a storm, and some decent clothing to wear to stay warm, and good food. Nothing wrong with that, but I think we've expected too much from science and technology, and even computers, as fun as they are. I just think I'm so blessed, so lucky to live in a computer age. They are so cool. And yet the point of a program like this is to say, let's look beyond that and leave the rat race to the rats. Talk about more appropriately integrating materialism into our lives so that we can do what else? What else is there to do? What do you think?
It's starting to change now. I mean, we're seeing the trends. We're moving away from conspicuous consumption. People are holding onto their automobiles longer than they ever did before. More people are using debit cards than credit cards now for the first time. We're starting to see people demanding value and values from their corporations and from their government. I think that's one of the things we're going to see as the evolution of consciousness begins, is people gathering together as a collective and saying, we don't want this behavior. We will not accept that behavior. We insist upon this behavior. And we want ethical behavior from our politicians. We want ethical behavior from our corporations. And I think we're powerful enough as a wiki, in a way. You know, we all come together with our own ideas, but we come together and co-create this. Unacceptable behavior is not accepted anymore, and acceptable behavior is demanded. And we can do that. We can create a world that works better for us. I think we can understand that we can't spend what we don't have. I mean, we can teach our children fiscal responsibility. You don't use your mortgage as an ATM machine. You know, we don't put together those kinds of financial instruments that are just, bound to fail. We can create much more responsible ways to live in the world. And the way we do that is to take what the best of us do and then teach our children how to do what the best of us do so the rest of us do it as well.
I think throughout history, people have been divided into camps of the good guys and the bad guys. It's understandable. Just human beings in general against the adversity of nature, the wild animal, or the environment, the adverse conditions that our ancestors must have had to suffer before they began to develop tools and come together in larger communities, bigger than a tribe. All of those skills and techniques, technologies, ways of resolving conflict, arbitrating disputes, creating police departments and fire departments and public safety. It's quite remarkable to watch that evolution of humanity. But throughout, there's always been this tendency to divide people, as I say, into either good guys or bad guys, and not much in the middle. You're either good or bad. You're with us or against us. And never the twain shall meet, right? What if we began to see every individual as having a good side and a bad side? This is a very different paradigm than trying to divide the world, and then I meet you, and then I'm trying to figure out, well, is Steve one of those good guys or is he one of those bad guys, right? Or maybe in a bunch of areas you're an ally, but there's a few areas where I'm not so sure about you, partner. What if we went to this new and different, I think more advanced paradigm that says, hey, everybody has a divine spark in them and everybody has a shadow. And when push comes to shove, you often don't know which side is going to come out. There's that great story about the Titanic where some people gave up their lives, sacrificed their lives deliberately to save other people. And at the same time, on the same ship, there were those men who dressed up in women's clothing to get on those very first lifeboats, no thought of the consequences to other people at all. There are some great conundrums in philosophy about the ethical challenges of who do you save if your friend falls overboard and your dog falls overboard. And you didn't really like your friend that much anyway, but you loved the dog. Who do you save first? We never really know about this blend of light and dark in us, but I think to begin to see that potential, the good and the bad, is in everyone. We've all got a black hat and a white hat. It's like that old American Indian thing. I've got two wolves in me constantly battling. And the grandson says, which one wins, grandfather? And wise old elder says, the one I feed is the one that wins.
Yeah, always the one you feed. Live with fear or live with love, and whichever one you feed will win. And I think that may be the shift we're talking about in consciousness, that more and more people continue to create a world that's safer than yesterday. And if we continue to do that, and we are doing that, I mean, the world is way safer than it ever used to be. If we continue to create a world that is safer than it used to be, and at the same time, wake up to the fact that that is so, because even though that is so, the media has done a great job of making us believe that we live in a very dangerous world. We live in a very confusing world, but we live in a very safe world. So the more and more we understand that we live in a safe world, then we'll stop doing those two things that people who feel endangered consistently do, the two behaviors that ruin it for everybody, that make this safe world so confusing and so difficult, that when people feel stressed, when people feel endangered, they act stupid and they do two things that wreck it for everybody else. They make bad decisions and careless mistakes. They make bad decisions because they're rushed. They think, I've got to make a decision right now, I'm in danger. And they make careless mistakes because, again, they're hurrying, And so, they're feeling rushed, they're feeling stressed. So if collectively the majority of people can take a breath, if collectively we get that before we do something, we look before we leap. If collectively we begin to teach our children in school and in neighborhood organizations that the way you deal with conflict is this nonviolent way of taking a deep breath and trying to see the other person's side as well, there's a lot of wonderful things we can do as we develop our EQ, as we develop our emotional intelligence as the human being evolves. And I think, to me, the greatest evolution of the mind in the next 100 years, we talked about 100 years ago, the greatest discovery was that you can change yourself by altering your attitude of mind. That was an amazing discovery 100 years ago. I think now the great discovery is that we not only know that, but we do it. that we not only understand that we can change ourselves by changing our attitude of mind, but that the majority of human beings start to change their attitudes of mind. The majority of people start to decide that there is a silver lining. The majority of people start to see the world from a non-Pollyanna optimistic point of view. That is, prepare for the worst, worry once, and then shoot for the best, and have a great ride on the way. That more and more people live in this upbeat, optimistic, positive, healthy way of living. The more people that do that, the safer the world actually does become.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something here. The idea of making the world safe has to go beyond safe from danger to safe from confusion, or safe from separation and always feeling that different is opposite. And if any difference is always opposite, then it's in opposition. Differences threaten you. You're missing out on the greater reality, the higher truth, that differences enrich you. If I go to the ice cream store, I want at least 31 flavors, not just one or two. I want the choice of going to all different kinds of restaurants, or wearing a variety of clothing to express myself. I like different kinds of music, and why not? So I think part of this is getting safe enough and helping other people to feel safe enough to take a look at the fact that we're presuming some kind of autonomic fight or flight thing, that anything that produces anxiety or stress or nervousness or even a little bit of fear must be about some sort of danger. And now I have to be defensive and protect myself, when in fact, it's much more likely that that stress, that nervousness, that little bit of fear is about something you don't understand. It's not a danger. Sometimes what you don't understand can be dangerous, but more to the point, understanding what it is that's stressing you out allows you to realize it really wasn't that dangerous in the first place. And more to the point, it's about you, not about the world around you. Now, I can change that. I think many people get credit for saying this, but I always attribute to Tolstoy the idea that everybody wants to change the world, but very few people ever think about changing themselves. Or that old axiom in Eastern philosophy about covering the world with leather to protect your feet. It's just a lot simpler to put on a pair of shoes. And, why change the whole world to enjoy a personal benefit when you could change yourself and make that your contribution to the world?
And that's the shift in consciousness. When people see that they create their world rather than wait for the government to create their world or their religion to create their world or their parents. At some point, they have to stop letting their parents create their world. And when we wake up to the fact that we create our own world, I mean, that this is the latest in brain science is that we're actually creating a world in there, we're not really seeing what there is. Everything that's coming in is just data, and our brain is taking this data and interpreting and making this world out of it. And your world is different than my world, and you've got different shaped neurons. I mean, neurons are like snowflakes. There's no two the same size. All my neurons. I
didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, there's no two neurons in the universe that are the same size. So, nature doesn't work that way, as you know. So it's amazing. Nobody could have a mind like mine or a mind like yours or anybody else's for that matter. And I think, again, the biggest shift in consciousness comes when we wake up, take responsibility, and say, I'm not only going to live my life in a moral and ethical way, but I'm going to help other people. When philanthropy becomes the norm rather than the exceptional, and when the norm is to teach your children to be ethical and moral and to teach your children to be philanthropic, and once we start that cycle, get out of this me, conspicuous consumption thing and realize that once you've got enough, more doesn't make you any happier. Once you got enough, and enough is variable, but once you got enough, more isn't a big deal. Helping other people is way more gratifying than having more stuff. And once people shift their consciousness and get that, I think the world changes. We fiscally become responsible. We ethically become responsible. We become responsible for our feelings, and we don't jump at people or bite their heads off because we misinterpret something they say. We look before we leap. We take that deep breath before we behave inappropriately. We find a way to increase not only our intellectual intelligence, our emotional intelligence, but our social intelligence as well.
Truth is, I think a lot of folks just are afraid to be curious about themselves for whatever reason. Maybe it's just a kind of a vicious cycle of I'm confused. I experience that as fear, even if I knew it was being promulgated by what I don't know about myself. It still scares me to take a look at it. Though, of course, that would be an antidote to the fear itself, wouldn't it? To understand. To face your fear allows you to understand what you don't understand if you turn away from your fear. If the fear were real danger, I'd understand turning away. Run like hell or stand your ground and fight. Your brain will switch you automatically into a mode where your respiration changes and your blood pressure changes and your muscles tighten and your pupils dilate and you got 3 million years of history you're pulling on. But to consciously take a breath and relax and say, again, maybe several times in a given day, well, this is stress and anxiety, but it's not about danger, it's confusion. I have to face it. It's not danger. It's something I don't understand. And at the center of all the things I don't understand stands me. I've got to be in the middle. I'm the target. I'm the bullseye of all the things in my life that are confusing. I hesitate to use the word ignorant, but truth is there are not a lot of words or phrases for what we don't know. There's ignorance, there's confusion, there's lack of awareness. I come up short. I don't find a lot of words or ways of talking about what we don't know. We don't really honor that we're really confused about a lot of things, especially ourselves. It's like your eyeballs point out, your ears are cupped to hear vibrations of sound from the outer world. We reach out with our arms, we step forward with our legs, and then we fall asleep at night. Well, our ancestors understood, and many humans still know, about the benefits of introspection, of closing your eyes and creating your own sense of safety, meditation, introspection, contemplation. I came across a word for it the other day that was sort of new to me, rumination. I hadn't thought of that in a while. It's being used more and more by scientists because when you explore what Steve and I call paradise, these alpha brainwave states, the light comes on, you understand that part of you that you didn't understand, and that means the fear goes away. Now you've created safety, and you're in a position to help other people do the same. Imagine what a contribution to be able to first help yourself feel safe in the world, and then promote that, spread that around, help other people. What greater gift could we have than to help people lose their fear, leave their fear behind, and feel safe in the world? That changes everything.
Yeah, we're still living with the same brain that lived in an unsafe world most of its life. So we're just adjusting to this world being safe now. And we've substituted confusion for danger because we're used to being afraid. So we picked confusion to be afraid of. But the evolution of consciousness is to recognize that when confusion is, oh no, I don't know. But when you take a deep breath and you go to paradise, it's, oh boy, I don't know. It's like, oh wow, here's something I don't know. And the greatest question in the world has always been why. Like, why is this? Why is that? Why is not a dangerous thing. If we think we need to know the answer or else, then why is a dangerous thing? And that's what confusion is. But if we want to know the answer because we don't need to know the answer, we just want to know the answer, and we're excited about the possibility of asking like why and how, and then that stuff we don't know isn't dangerous to us. It's exciting to us. It's not a tunnel with a train coming at us. It's a tunnel that we can go into and explore. All of a sudden, what we call confusing becomes the most exciting thing in our lives when we feel safe and we explore it through introspection, reflection, contemplation, rumination, or prayer, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, no program on the future of mind science would be complete without some significant reference to emotional intelligence, and this is a burgeoning field, fortunately. We're now understanding that in addition to mental intelligence having at least 8 qualities, it used to be you had one IQ number, now it looks like there's a system of 7 or even 8 intelligences that need to be assessed to really understand what makes people smart and what their particular intelligence profile is. Well, in the same way, there is something called an EQ, or an emotional intelligence. This expresses itself often in the way we socialize. Relationship management is a new field now, and an important field. It looks like it's one of those 80-20 deals where what you learn from a book, your product knowledge, how well you know the business is about 20% of your success, and 80% is how you deal with people. Do you understand how to approach conflict? Are you sensitive to people's feelings? Are you a good listener? Do you know how to, if you're a boss or a supervisor, pull a person aside and criticize them constructively in private, but always pull them out into the open if you got something nice to say, and congratulate them in public in front of their friends. Little tricks like this, little tools of the trade, come naturally to people who have a high emotional intelligence. And that ability to manage relationships is really born of, as you might suspect, an understanding of self. In his truly seminal work on emotional intelligence at Harvard University, Daniel Goleman talks about 4 areas or 4 aspects. In order, it starts with self-awareness. You have to feel your own feelings. You have to understand that you feel, how you feel, why you feel, the way you feel. It's an intuitive skill. It's not illogical, but non-logical, to develop that language of emotional feelings. So the first 2 parts are self-awareness and then self-emotional management. And then 3 and 4 would be empathy and relationship management. But part of the future of mental development of mind science certainly has to be emotional intelligence.
I think there's a lot more room for very quick growth in terms of the human being in that area than there is in the intellectual intelligence area. Yeah, we're getting smarter. IQs are going up. I mean, one generation's brighter than the next. I don't think we have very good ways of judging that. Certainly standardized tests and the Stanford Binet IQ tests are very limited in what they actually do explore. But clearly, the smartest people are getting smarter than ever. And there is growth that's happening. But the biggest growth that I think can happen is when people start to become aware of their intelligence emotionally and don't knee-jerk react. They replace their jump to conclusions, they replace their look before they leap behaviors with take a breath, think about it for a moment, and then choose among a variety of even-tempered, well-reasoned responses. I love that phrase, even-tempered, well-reasoned responses. That's what happens when we become emotionally more intelligent. We don't knee-jerk. We don't just do what we did last time. We might do what we did last time, but we think it over and decide, is there something better to do this time instead? If we do that, then, to me, that ends most divorce and most lawsuits and most war and most hitting each other and most bad stuff. If we just took a breath and tried to see it from the other person's perspective, have a little compassion, a little empathy for each other, that kind of stronger emotional connection, make it like we're both on the same side of the table against this problem, whether it's you versus me. Once we start to do more of that, and that can happen quickly, that can happen in a generation. That can happen with one generation of adults saying, we demand our school system teach our children this, and we're going to teach it to them in the homes as well. This is something that can make the world a whole lot safer, a whole lot better, virtually overnight.
This particular program, as you obviously know, is part of a series called Finding Yourself in Paradise, and we always capitalize that self. The suggestion is that beyond the ego, not only beside the ego, but above, I think we could agree, superior to the ego, is a sense of self that we can arrive at when we use paradise thinking, alpha brainwave, meditation, contemplation. Steve and I like visualization and guided meditation techniques. Mental and emotional intelligence to create a state of mindful awareness. This is the higher self. It's the self that's aware of itself as not separative, but rather unitive. It's a level of expanded awareness or higher consciousness that tends to focus on the big picture rather than the tiny little details. It tends to reveal the links, the connection, the nexus in unity in systems, whereas in a state of normal consciousness where there's more stress and anxiety, we tend to be attracted to and distracted by what appear to be differences and contradictions. So we're not complete thinkers if we don't know how to be mindful, how to take a breath. As you exhale, feel relaxation. You can do this in moments. We're not talking about sitting for an hour with your eyes closed in a yoga position. We're talking about a single deep breath. You don't even have to close your eyes. Sometimes at work, you're not allowed to close your eyes. You don't have to. You can just unfocus your gaze for a moment. You could be looking at the wastebasket in the corner. It doesn't matter. You just stop focusing. You unfocus your attention visually and allow your imagination to come into play. And that's where you start to see the bigger picture. It's It's often discussed as a coming of light, like the light bulb archetype popping on, or the dawning of a new idea, right? It's coming a little more slowly, but it's the light, like, oh, now I see. Heck, this has been here all along. I just didn't see it. Because in normal consciousness, you have 8 or 10 thoughts competing for your attention. Plus, somehow I got addicted to adrenaline, called it excitement, and multitasking as if it were a real good thing. Well, sometimes it can be, but not as a lifestyle, right? That type A behavior creates dis-ease and all kinds of problems with heart and cancer and the immune system. The benefits are countless of taking a breath and relaxing, but they still come under the overarching umbrella principle of mindfulness. Get the big picture. Go for the gestalt. Logic will always serve you when you want to break it down and look at the little details. You got that wired. You know how to do that. What we can practice, however, to promote our intelligence, both mental and emotional, and to expand our awareness, to develop our ability not only to understand ourselves, but to empathize and to manage those relationships. The rewards are outrageous. Again, making somebody feel good. Imagine with just a few words, you can help them to feel safe in the world, and especially if you disagree on significant things, to have the skill to not only tolerate, but embrace that disagreement and do it with all of your respect and dignity in place, granting to others the respect they deserve and their right to disagree. It's quite remarkable. And again, we're not talking about, zooming out to the point where you're totally lost and confused, spaced out, dissociated. Detachment is one step back. It's just like one little zoom out to get the bigger picture. Just the intention to see the bigger picture. Notice how stress will always take you down to the little detail. That's okay. Just make sure that you also supplement those bits and pieces and separated elements with an overarching conceptual view. I think that's real expanded awareness.
That really is the key, because as you step back, you take your ego with you, but it no longer is in charge. As you step back and see the big picture, the part of you that needs to be afraid, the part of you that needs to judge things and control things, that's no longer in charge. That's no longer the primary focus anymore. Your mind has taken a step back and now sees it from a bigger picture. So all of a sudden, that thinking, for example, people with always think that the problem is people who don't have, like the haves blame the have-nots, the rich people blame the poor people. It's always the poor people, or the people in the West always blame the people in the East, or the people who are this color always blame people who are that color. You take one step back, and that doesn't happen anymore. One step back, and that kind of thinking, that black or white, right or wrong, either or thinking goes away. That's ego thinking. That's ego-based thinking.
Them becomes us.
Exactly. One step back. And no longer, if you're rich, you think the problem is just those stupid poor people. One step back, and you get some compassion, you get some understanding, you get some empathy. One step back. And that one step back, actually, it's thinking to take that one step back is just as important as taking the one step back. It's realizing I have the ability now to get out of my fear, out of my ego, take a step, see a bigger picture, a more higher conceptual understanding of this thing, see it from a different perspective, and all of a sudden everything changes. Because no longer am I looking at it from the point of view of it's dangerous to me. Now I'm looking at it from the point of view of it's curious to me. I want to understand it.
Another area where I think we're going to see significant improvement in mind science and the development of the mental and emotional intelligences is what in the past has been called extrasensory projection or perception, the so-called psychic phenomena. It's, I think, best understood simply as empathy, a concept we already talked about. And
it's not a superpower that some people have and other people don't.
No. In fact, we see this empathy, this rapport, this psychic stuff in really pre-industrialized ancient societies, like the Aborigines of Australia, for example, in their dream time. They routinely communicate with each other over long distances. We know whales can do this, and we attribute it to sonar, but come on, over 1,000 miles? Or the classic experiments that have been done repeatedly, where a mother rabbit is put inside a lead cage and on a submarine goes way down in the bottom of the ocean, while newborn babies from that mother are killed in a laboratory. The Soviets did this in the early 60s. And
psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain.
yeah, Ostrander and Schroeder, that book, talk about this. And this has been repeated. Even plants seem to have a rapport and understand intention. It's as if all living things share an electromagnetic field. It's really no mystery. It's just perhaps there are magnetic influences and electromagnetic fields that are too subtle for us to measure, or frequencies that at work in other dimensions that we don't particularly understand yet.
And magic is just science we haven't figured out yet.
There you go. I mean, we all have had so-called psychic experiences. Maybe we're smart enough not to call them psychic because you get those weird looks, but you think of somebody and the phone rings, or you're mulling over some ideas, you drive down the street and suddenly you see that very word on a billboard. So-called coincidence has a lot of different names that suggest it's not merely coincidental, it's serendipitous. I noticed Scientific American magazine this month has a cover story on serendipity. They apparently decided not to call it synchronicity. This is a word that Carl Jung coined after studying the Book of Changes, the Chinese I Ching, and doing work with archetypes, the idea that we have shared dream symbols, even transculturally, people who've never encountered each other have similar archetypes in their dreams. And
I've taken this kind of stuff around the world, and no matter what culture I take it to and ask them to create their safe, peaceful place, it's always got water. 8 out of 10 people in China, 8 out of 10 people in the United States, 8 out of 10 people in Italy, it doesn't matter. Water is always prevalent in people's minds.
Yeah. So Jung created this idea of a collective unconscious, a level of mind, perhaps, where we're all plugged in together, some kind of central switchboard. And in Eastern philosophy, you have a similar idea, the Akashic records. And even Judeo-Christian mythology has God's big book where everything gets written down, right? As if there is a central storage house of information, of all human memory or all consciousness, perhaps springs from a single source. It's fun to experiment with all these different philosophies, and I mean experiment, not just ponder the philosophy, but you can experiment, especially with people you're close to. Develop your rapport. If you love someone and they love you, then it's easy to feel safe with them. If it's easy to feel safe with them, then you can explore together the powers of the mental and emotional nature. And that will certainly benefit each individual, but I think also deepen and enrichen the relationship as well. And if that works for a couple, then that could work for a family. And if it worked for a family, it could work for larger and larger groups as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas of potential growth, I think, for the individual. But as I see it, the biggest growth for consciousness over the next century is as a gestalt, as a community, as a world. I think we're going to learn to live together better, as a culture. And I think that the concept of us co-creating things together, like this whole wiki encyclopedia concept, the wiki dictionary thing, I think that's so cool. Everybody contributing, and I think everybody calling on each other to ask for more value, ask for more values, ask for more ethics, and to have a social code that works. I think asking for people to become better, I think that's one of the things that minds alike can do. So as we wake up, as we evolve to the point where we understand that not only is it possible to step into that place where I think, therefore I am, where I'm the observer of my thoughts and feelings and not bound up in them, but that I remember to do so frequently in my life, that I step back out of the muck and the mire, the stuff going on, to take that bigger perspective, to see my brothers and sisters as a part of me instead of separate from me, to be able to look at what can I do next that is of benefit to all of us instead of just to me. How do I consume in a way that isn't conspicuous, that isn't wasteful, that isn't hurting? And what can I do to contribute to solving the problems? Like, how do we invent a battery the size of a silver dollar that'll last for a year? Or how do we invent the way of using your mind to propel a car forward? I mean, we're going to come up with some incredible inventions over the course of the next 100 years compared to the last 100, probably way more amazing. How do we contribute to that? Not only, maybe we're the scientists that can actually make it happen, or maybe we're just the one that can come up with the initial idea of what it is that could happen. But virtually everything that was invented in this century was sort of thought about in the science fiction of previous days, with the notable exception of the internet. I never saw that mentioned anywhere in science fiction, but everything else just about somebody thought about it and wrote about it and then figured out how to do it.
Even the guys that invented the internet didn't know they were inventing the internet.
They had no idea how they did that.
Let's go to paradise. Let's do one of these alpha processes, and we'll practice what we preach a little bit and dream together of what we can do as we develop our consciousness, as we literally grow our brains and improve the efficiency of our mental and emotional intelligences. Get comfortable, pump up the pillows there, get nice and balanced, and begin to take one and another, maybe 3 or 4 slow, deep breaths as you close your eyes and begin to relax.
And find yourself in paradise. Your paradise. Before you hear, in 3 dimensions and crystal clear. You see it or smell it or just feel like you're there with every refreshing breath of fresh air. Your paradise. And it feels really nice and safe and secure. And here, it's clear. And you can be sure that from this place, your ego can rest, can step aside. Because here you're blessed with being safe, so no need for ego to protect. Ego can rest, and you can expect that you can see things different from here, through a lens of love devoid of fear. Everything looks much more beautiful and clear through a lens of love devoid of fear. So just for now, see things this way. Fear is gone, love's here to stay. And whatever you look at in this loving way, you feel compassion and empathy and connection and joy. Feeling safe with this state of mind here in paradise that you employ.
I'd like to suggest that you ask yourself what you care about, just to see what bubbles up. Oh, there are many things, dozens of things, scores of things you could list, but which ones seem to stand above the rest? Things that you care about. Which ideas, which concepts seem to demand your attention when you move your awareness into your heart and feel how it feels to care about something? And as you choose just one for the purposes of this exercise, ask yourself, why do I care? Why is this important to me? And what does it say about me that I care about this? And then remind yourself that you're able to continue to feel safe and relaxed while sensitive to something that's really important to you. And you understand that in the caring is motivation. Why you think and feel and act the way you do. And in the motivation and in the caring is identity, a piece of yourself. Like others in some ways, but ultimately, by definition, ultimately, unique. So many others may care about the same types of things as you, but nobody cares in quite the same way. Your profile is unique, as if you were a piece of a great jigsaw puzzle, a puzzle that, if even one piece was missing, would not be whole. And that your particular caring makes a difference.
Imagine a future where your temper is found never to be lost again. Imagine a future where strangers aren't enemies but potential friends. Imagine a future where people have compassion for each other and the things that we do. Imagine a future where the world is better and it's full of good people like you. Imagine it's true. And help co-create a kind of a future that can really be great. Let's reach out to each other. Be the first to befriend and receive a hand, and then do it again. Be proactive in friendship, proactive in love, proactive in letting the little things go and rising above. Let yourself grow and see what you can be. Imagine a future that will set you free. Imagine a future where your mind is clear and you live in love and you have respect for your fear, but it's clear the fear is not controlling you. It's there to assist when you need it to. And you live safe and you live free. Imagine a future and how it could be.
Reorient yourself to the sound of our voices. Remember the room in which you sit and what you'll see in a moment when I ask you to open your eyes wide awake. And tell yourself that it's going to be really, really easy, effortless even, for you to bring with you the feelings of safety, feelings of connection and caring, maybe a sense of purpose, motive, even some identity. As you now take a nice, slow, deep breath, hold as you peak for just a moment and exhale slowly as you open your eyes now, wide awake, alert, rested, refreshed, feeling fine, back in the room better than before.
and aware of the fact that that wonderful place of paradise that you just visited is there for you anytime you choose. It's not just when you're listening to these guided imagery exercises. You can do the guiding yourself. In fact, if you've got a minute or even 10 or 20 seconds, you can take yourself to paradise. I do it every time I take a drink of water. I close my eyes and go to my peaceful place. It's easy to do. The challenge is remembering to do it. And if we can help you remember, that's great. There's about 135 other personal empowerment and self-improvement topics that you might be interested in. Go to our website, focuspassion.com, and check it out. And remember the send one to a friend gadget. That's the coolest thing of all. Anything that you've got, you can send to anybody you want, anytime you want, to as many people as you want, and there's absolutely no charge.
Thanks for listening. Share these programs with your friends, and as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.